If you look into the promotional material of Twin Peaks, or the European TV show special, you will find that Bob says this line that really throws you off. He says, "I'll catch you with my death bag." It's a weird line, and one of those things in Twin Peaks left unresolved by the end of the series. If you watched my other video explaining the Blue Monkey in Fire Walk With Me, you'd already know that some lines in the show are actually riddles of occult nature, much like Crowley's Book of Lies. The Blue Monkey is a reference to the Blue Ape of Thoth, a messenger god who clumsily misspeaks due to his inferior brain. That same theme of miscommunication extends to Gordon Cole when he mishears things. Messenger gods in mythology come in many flavors, but typically their messages are often misunderstood due to the overwhelming nature of the angels' messages. John Dee and Edward Kelly were preoccupied with a, quote, universal language to understand the angels they claimed were talking to them, or at least Edward Kelly, who was a con man, and was really just getting seizures. They pioneered what is understood as Enochian magic, which Aleister Crowley picked up on later. Crowley, as we may remember, is an individual who wrote a book called Moonchild, which is about basically Laura Palmer being born in part 8. It's very similar, the themes, the plot, the whole thing, to the point where one could say, hey, Mark Frost and David Lynch were very much inspired by this, and any gaps in, say, Laura Palmer's origin story can be just pieced together with this other story by Crowley. You can see my Gematria video about it if you have the stomach for it, but what you need to know is Lynch and Frost are vividly aware of Crowley's work and utilize it heavily in the show, and my channel is trying to explain how that is the case. So Bob says, "I'll catch you with my death bag," and there's like no real bag to speak of in the show. If we look up Enochian magic, there's a plane of existence, which Crowley and John Dee call an ether. It's not a being, it's like a whole place, it's a world, which shares that name, bag, B-A-G. There's another ether called Uti, U-T-I, that matches the final episode of Twin Peaks from the moment Cooper wakes up in Odessa, but that's for another time. The ether called Bag, and the vision Crowley has while witnessing this plane of existence, actually matches part 8 instead of that final episode, where the woodsmen enter Sarah Palmer's hometown. The first line is as follows. "There cometh an angel into the stone with opalescent, shining garments like a wheel of fire on every side of him, and in his hand is a long flail of scarlet lightning. His face is black, and his eyes white, without any pupil or iris. The face is very terrible indeed to look upon. Now in front of him is a wheel, with many spokes and many tires. It is like a fence in front of him." Each sentence needs explaining here. I won't go into its theoretical or theological interpretation very much as a standalone work, unless it's required to explain how this relates to Twin Peaks. But here goes. The opal stone is a crystal ball Crowley is using to get the vision. Looking into it is part of Enochian magic, crystal ball reading, that whole thing is from this, generally in pop culture. The color is often associated with a fish, and if you want to draw a line between, rainbow trout, or there's a fish in a percolator at this point, I think that's fair. I won't make that argument today, but something to think about. The wheel of fire and scarlet lightning, I think, fairly describes the nuclear explosion in part 8. Scarlet is just a fancy word for the color red, and lightning, comes from the heavens, shoots down, bangs the earth. I think that's fair. The eyes without pupil in the show is, of course, the white of the eyes referenced by the woodsman's poem. The black face is analogous with the oily look of the woodsmen themselves, and the fact that he is terrible to look upon is covered by the fact that anyone who looks at him is petrified in this scene. The wheel in front of him is, of course, the car our lumberjack runs into. The wheels of old cars have spokes as well as tires, last I checked. And the fact that it acts like a fence matches the fact that the woodsman had to stop and deal with that car before proceeding. However, I have a better explanation. In tarot, the meaning of fence is represented by the letter Chet, which is the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. We're in part 8. This is the 8th letter, something to think about how Lynch is so clever. The letter Chet also is associated with the Chariot Tarot card. Actually, Chet Desmond is also associated with the Chariot. I can talk about that another time, but something to think about. His story was short, but I'm sure we could fill in the blanks if we ever wanted to. Moving back to the passage, though. What happens next, I need to explain a bit more. Crowley is trying to traverse what he thinks is a layer of reality that the farther he goes into, the sooner he can escape from the world that we know to become essentially an angel of sorts. Sort of his White Lodge idea. Each of these crystal ball experiences, therefore, have a trial where an angel in that world holds secrets, and Crowley tries to, shake those secrets out of him. In Twin Peaks, it's very likely that Chalfont's in the final episode, or perhaps Audrey with that little dwarf guy. These angels have layers of mystery, and basically Crowley has to pull them back, lift the veil, so to speak, and they present themselves as different beings. So, looks like a woodsman is actually something else behind the veil, which is a theme in Twin Peaks as well. Quote, "And he cries, O man, art thou, wouldst penetrate the mystery? For it is hidden unto the end of time. And I answer him, time is not, save in the darkness of her womb by whom evil came." So this line is pretty simple. It's a bit of a setup. Crowley says that the riddle is false. Time is meaningless in higher dimensions of reality, which, if you watch Twin Peaks, time by the end of the show is more of a tool than something linear. The last sentence, "save in the darkness of her womb by whom came evil," is a bit of a tall order for now to explain, but basically the female entity that puked up Bob is in the darkness in the show, and sort of an equivalent in this passage. Moving further into the passage, quote, "And now the wheel breaks away, and I see him as he is. His garment is black beneath the opal veils, but it is lined with white, and he has the shining belly of a fish, and enormous wings of black and white feathers, in innumerable little legs, and crawls like a centipede, and a tall long tail like a scorpion. The breasts are human, but they are all scored with blood. And he cries, O thou who hast broken down the veil, knowest thou not that who cometh where I am must be scarred by many sorrows?" So time is a construct, and I guess at this point the car is long gone and driven away at this point. He is black and white and has the belly of a fish. The black and white can be taken literally, right? The whole scene is in black and white. The belly of a fish is hidden behind the cult that Crowley made. So to sort of understand what the belly of a fish means, we have to climb this weird cult ladder, which I'm not really interested in doing. But pulling from some sources that Crowley probably pulled from, a fish is the subconscious mind, basically. As we swim in the dark like fish, we find new things about the world we live in, new feelings, new existentialism. And the point is that we are always swimming in the dark, sort of blind, following light, right, like a fish would, if it's the dark sea of the subconscious mind. The same way our feelings are supposed to be a stream of whatever is changing in circumstance. You can read Carl Jung if this is an analogy that really resonates with you. I think the first 100 pages of Aeon links the fish to such about but also Jesus. When I watch the show, I sort of make that association, sort of a common occult symbol to relate the fish to the subconscious, but also like sort of individualism, existentialism, so to speak. If you want to talk about what a fish means to you in Twin Peaks in the comment section, I am super curious. I know this video is going to have like 2 comments, but yeah. The wings of black and white in that line could really mean anything. Could be the owls. A lot of things have wings. Could be just mastering air, which air magic is sort of part of the level of these archons that they work in, or angels. demons. They're all kind of similar. Again, I'm not in the OTO. That organization, some would argue, was like the Freemasons, but with orgies, which sounds great, but I don't think it's like that today. I will say the centipede may be an analogy to the fact that there's many woodsmen and, like with many legs, and the scorpion represents suicide. Crowley has made that super clear in the past in books. I think these are generally symbols of sorrow that they're describing, sort of a mythological creature that is embodying sorrow. And if this creature existed anywhere, I suppose it would be that grumbling we hear in Sarah Palmer's house. If we had to tangibly say, hey, this is the white horse, hey, these are the woodsmen that are in this passage, where's the centipede with the scorpion tail? I would say it's in the background, unshown, in Sarah Palmer's house, just with that weird, ominous drone that was happening in that one scene in season 3 in Sarah Palmer's house. So Crowley retorts from this riddle leading question, this back and forth. He says, sorrow is not, save in the darkness for the room of her by whom came evil. And then he says, I pierce the mystery of his breast, and therein is a jewel. So basically, he has a sword and he stabs him. It is a sapphire as great as an ostrich egg, and thereon is graven this sigil. The sigil on the black egg looks like, and I'm sorry, but it looks like, if anything, like a paperclip. People in the past have found that the woodsmen represent Operation Paperclip in the show, and I guess this sort of supports that. The insight that sorrow and time were just worldly illusions is sort of the answer to the riddle of God of Light in the show, just to bring it back to the show a bit more, to that scene. If we assume this passage matches that woodsman scene, that riddle, God of Light, needs a whole video. Obviously, other people have done that because it's such an iconic line in the show. But basically, yeah, Cooper needs to transcend sorrow and time to overcome woodsman, for sure. There's more to it, but let's move on to the next line. But there is also much writing on the stone. Very minute characters carved. I cannot read them. He points with his flail to the sapphire, which is now outside of him and bigger than himself. And he cries, Hail, warden of the gates of eternity, who knowest not, thy right hand from thy left. And for the aeon, my father is a god with clasped hands, wherein he holdeth the universe, crushing it into the dust ye call stars. So firstly, the idea of a giant orb sort of representing a being, right? So a giant orb comes out, or an egg comes out, much like Bob coming out of of Evil Cooper. So that's where that's from. Okay, that's, Lynch is smart, but he grabbed it from this. The god that does a crushing is Thoth. He basically crushes the universe with his bare hands, his two hands. Lynch is basically making an argument that when the woodsmen crush the heads of their victims, they're sort of crushing their universe, their little microcosm. So like Thoth would crush the macrocosm, the smaller beings under him would crush those microcosms. There's also an argument perhaps to be made that one's consciousness is the universe, sort of, or the universe perceiving itself, or I don't know, I didn't listen to that Tool album, but you sort of get that new agey vibe from it, certainly. The next few lines are about being a well-rounded individual, to be brief, sort of like Dale Cooper's final form, right? Little evil, little good, little bit of column A, little bit of column B. So, hail unto thee, who knowest thy right eye from thy left, for in the new aeon of my father there is but one light. He goes to the nostrils and then the ears. He's talking about life and death as in a dichotomous way, or saying that there is no difference. Sound or silence, no difference. And then, whoso hath power to break open this sapphire stone shall find within 4 elephants having tusks of mother of pearl, and behind whose backs are castles, those castles which ye call the watchtowers of the universe. The watchtowers in the show are referenced in Jeffrey's kettle sauna thing. That kettle sauna thing is a World War II era watchtower from Europe. The castles, I think, are, one of them would be where the giant lives. I imagine there's another that's above a convenience store, perhaps, where you would find those kettles. Again, the animal analogies or that symbolism is a little lost to me, but the elephants are basically playing the role of Atlas, that Greek or Roman god, and sort of carrying the weight of the world. That's basically the idea with the elephant. Lynch might be referencing The Elephant Man. I haven't watched it. It's kind of hard to watch those. But if you've watched it and you see anything about the watchtower or sort of Atlas, just let me know in the comments. It's a hypothesis I'll have when I do end up watching The Elephant Man. The next lines explain the occult symbolism of the rose just beautifully. This woodsman angel is saying that he wants his mother, that is this abomination that birthed Bob in part 8, to remain hidden. Everything that the woodsmen do in the show, therefore, just deducing from this passage, but also just seeing their behavior in the show, is likely because it better hides away this abomination. The principal was framed and then arrested because the woodsmen thought that they were close to opening a portal. The major was also murdered, perhaps for similar reasons. If a scorpion represents suicide, maybe they drove Harold to kill himself by corrupting Donna. That's a little bit far-fetched, but, it's the evil that men do, or some sort of evil in the background, or the mechanism of sorrow that this being represents. It's not too far to say that poetically, if you ask, hey, why does God have evil in this world? Well, it's really just this angel, at least according to this passage. So, reading the lines. Let me dwell in peace within the breast of the angel, that is, warden of the Aether. Let not the shame of my mother be unveiled. Let her be put to shame that lieth among the lilies that are beyond the stars. O man that must ever be opening. So, sort of O'Dale Cooper, who must always be trying to solve crime, right? When wilt thou learn to seal up the mysteries of the creation, to fold thyself over thyself as a rose in the embrace of night? But thou must play the wanton to the sun, and the wind must tear thy petals from thee, and the bee must rob thee of thy honey, and thou must fall into the dusk of things. Amen and amen. The last lines of this are just beautiful. The mystery of the universe are hidden like the petals of a rose. The rose petals are then blown in the wind and lost, and very hard to find. To gather rose petals is to open veils, according to Crowley, and so the mystery of Laurel Palmer, a blue rose, is to solve a manufactured mystery from the atomic bomb, once again sort of scattered. We continue with some more nice poetry, just moving on into the passage. Verily the light is hidden, therefore he who hideth himself is like unto the light, but thou openest thyself. Thou art like unto the darkness that bindeth the belly of the great goddess. The great goddess being that abomination character in Twin Peaks, just to sort of put that back into context. So that line's a little counterintuitive. Also, it says thou and unto, and thou art. So let's digest that. So, just to put it in Twin Peaks words, Laura is the light, the woodsmen are looking for the light, and Laura is hiding from the woodsmen. When you deny your true self, you are also the light, sort of like if you try to be a good person, you are also the light. But that denies your true nature, which would make you similar to the darkness, like the womb of the abomination, so closer to the evil that men do. Crowley in the early 20th century had to hide his bisexual nature from society, and I think that's sort of coming out here. And if you wanted to psychoanalyze Crowley a little bit, he made a cult so he could have sodomy. If you were to treat Crowley like a prophet, one may feel encouraged in his time to break taboos and do a little bit of sodomy, just if you're barking up this OTO tree. That's not to say, the OTO is just an excuse to have gay sex. I don't even mean that in a funny way. That's just sort of the historical context that we can sort of apply onto Crowley and say, hey, maybe this is why we don't have cults like this anymore. We're sort of all over that, right? We don't have to hide anything, so we don't do any weird secretive culty stuff. In the show, all that means is, again, you just need to be both very bad, like Laura, at night, and also evil Cooper, but also very good, sort of like Laura, and normal Cooper to transcend. It's like the Water in the Well poem, but sort of just said in one line or, a few sentences. That's the idea. So the line, this is the water, this is the well, drink forth and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes, etc. Basically, you do this baptism. You descend into the well, and they say, hey, got a light. You're doing the darkness, right, by going deep into the abyss, and then you have to produce light in this water. So we see Philip Jeffries in a kettle, and he produces light, which produces heat, which makes steam. There's sort of a, fire within water is hard to do unless you have motor oil or something of that nature to burn, right? You can't burn wood that's wet, but you can burn oil, and yada, yada, yada. That's sort of the preachy alchemical side of that poem. I'm sure there's many ways to interpret it, but I believe that's sort of the idea here is baptize yourself, be a little evil, deal with your shadow self, and then come back sort of in this middle path, not knowing your left from your right, seeing that there's no difference. They're both bad and good in their own ways because, there's always some victim, right? The rest of the passage, the last 10% of it basically does not really apply to what we're talking about. It doesn't apply to the scene. Crowley fights a monster similar to Bob, but fails. He'll sort of fight him later at another time. It's also given a cryptogram to solve that opens a gate. Again, not really important to Twin Peaks, but that's it. That's probably what the bag is. When Bob says, I'll catch you with my death bag, it's like, I'll catch you with my woodsman. The white horse is, of course, referenced in part 8 with the woodsman, and death rides a white horse. It's just really nuts how an obscure cut of Bob blows this whole case wide open and sort of once again links it back to a Crowley reference or, some occult references. It doesn't have to be Crowley. There are other occult references, Enochian magic, that can sort of beat around the bush for these things. You have the symbol of death on a white horse. That's in many places, right? It's not like Crowley invented that, but it does match this chapter really well. And so that is sort of the thesis of this video. So we can stop here and not go any further. And I think that's pretty good. But if we did want to go further, and this is sort of less backed up and I'm less certain about this is more speculative is what I'm trying to say. Before I previously said that Judy was actually a riddle where Jew was part of an entity called sort of Jew, which is actually pronounced you, and Udi, so the Udi part of Judy, was a reference to an Aether called Uti, UTI. Jew is this sort of messiah, it's from something called the Books of Jew. Arguably, there's also the Stele of Jew. But basically, if you're a Jew, you're sort of a messiah, and you're going to take people to the promised land with Jesus and 3 baptisms and, certain illustrated diagrams. The book is not well studied, but the fact that it's not well studied is sort of taken advantage of by Crowley and other esoteric folks, as you can kind of say anything, is sort of in it. So I'll catch you with my death bag now turns into I'll catch you, this true messiah, with my woodsman. If we take that even further, so we replace the word death, so instead of death bag, it's going to be doth. Doth is a place where this Charonzon character is. It's the abyss, where we have this monster that has to get destroyed. It represents your shadow figure in a Jungian sense, and it's what Bob really is in the story. So I'll catch you with my doth, and then B-A-G, the Aether. Doth and bag are sort of, they describe similar places. It's the abyss. It is the womb or the belly of this great creator. It's eternal darkness. You're basically this little fish in a dark sea. Both of those thematically are very close, or sorry, not thematically, semantically very close in terms of what they represent. So to say doth bag is sort of saying I'll sort of swallow you like a whale, and I'll catch you in this sort of shadow figure fight, which kind of happens, right? I'll capture you with a story about overcoming your shadow. The true messiah, that is the Zhu. It's kind of as open-ended as, the question, who's Judy? It could be Dale Cooper, right, as sort of our savior hero character. It could be Major Garland Briggs. Could be some other character, right? It could be that little magician boy, or the Chalfonts. I wouldn't say that that's the case. I'd say it's just Dale Cooper, and what Bob said wasn't prophetic. He never actually did capture Dale Cooper with his doth bag, with his little woodsman of the abyss. So yeah, I think that's, if we wanted to go further with that line, get all a little weird about it and speculative, I think that's fair. But the thing about doth and how Bob represents doth, the proof is basically the Bob equivalent is Charonzon. Charonzon is this lurker of the abyss, the thing that you have to strike down, your shadow figure, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking in circles. Crowley got possessed by Charonzon, allegedly, in an account where basically he sexually assaulted, or sort of became naked and tried to attack his colleague. And the colleague had to find a knife and sort of point it at him real bad to calm him down. And that's and then to sort of cover it up, there was a written account of this in some journal, and Crowley tore it up. He tore out Laura Palmer's diary, right? It was in someone's journal. He tore it out to hide that possession of this Charonzon character, this Bob character. Charonzon is sort of a part of this Gnostic creation myth, which includes this guy Yaldabaoth, and yeah, I won't get into the weeds about Gnosticism because this video is preachy enough, but basically that's the idea. You can go down a whole Wikipedia rabbit hole about Gnosticism and Charonzon on your own time. I'm not going to do that. You guys don't like long videos, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But yeah, keeping with that theme of occult symbolism, we can do more chapters in Visions and the Voices, because it does take a lot of interpretation to do. And subscribe for that into my little descent into occult madness. And 93.